This reading was commissioned by Anonymous. A Throne Before Queen. This story contains tickling and mind-breaking. Princess Celestia sighed in relief, closing the door to her bedroom as she sat down on her bed, laying flat on the mattress. After a full day of partying, and after all the guests had left, all she wanted to do was sleep after a fantastic party. Celestia was relieved to actually feel like herself, even if it wasn't for long. Keeping the image of being a prim and proper princess became tedious and boring at times. So she would set up parties in order to unwind, even just a little bit. Using her magic to turn off the light switch, she kicks off her golden sandals, adjusts herself to rest on the pillow, and closes her eyes. 10 minutes later, there's a knock on the door and a familiar voice. "Princess Celestia?" She lifts up her head, rubbing her eyes. She sits up, grumbling as she hits the light switch again, opening the door. "Oh, sorry. Is this a bad time?" At the other end of the door was Twilight Sparkle, her pupil turned princess. Celestia manages a smile, still wiping her eyes. "Of course not. I thought you were going home, though." "I was, but I just wanted to spend more time with you," she said sheepishly. Celestia lets out a small sigh. "Oh, anything for you, Twilight," she says, yawning. "Oh, I'm sorry. The party was just so much fun. I'm absolutely tired." "I'll say, you really know how to dance," Twilight chuckled. Celestia nodded, smiling. "Yes, it's not often I get that opportunity. I was hoping I wasn't out of practice," she said, walking back to her bed. Twilight closed the door behind her, making sure it was shut tight by giving it a quick, forceful push with her hand as Celestia walked. Celestia sits at the side of the bed, patting a part of the mattress next to her for Twilight to sit down. "I know it's late, but I didn't get to spend a lot of time with you at the party," Twilight said, sitting down next to her, grinning. "I understand. We haven't had..." She let out a much louder, drawn-out yawn, smacking her lips. "A one-to-one talk in a very long time. I won't overstay my welcome, promise." Celestia and Twilight spent at least 10 minutes talking about Twilight's adventures, how baby Flurryheart was learning so many new things from her parents, and how wild and unrestrained Celestia seemed at the party. Celestia did her best to stay awake, but couldn't help but yawn every so often. Twilight picked up on the hint, deciding to leave her to rest. "Well, I love spending time with you, Princess. I'll leave you to rest so you can raise the sun tomorrow," Twilight said, staring at the door. "I loved spending time with you as well, but I really need my rest. Do you mind turning off the lights and locking the door on the way out, Twilight?" She yawned, resting her head back down. "Of course," she says, staring down at Celestia as she starts to fall asleep. "Thank you." She blinked before closing her eyes, but just for a split second, Celestia swore she saw Twilight's eyes turn green. Her eyes shoot wide open, confirming her suspicions. Twilight's eyes definitely had a sinister green glow to them. "Twilight?" The purple pony grinned, now with defiant fangs. "Am I?" she smirked, forcefully pushing her hands on Celestia's shoulders, pinning her down.
"Oh, this was almost too easy,"
she cackles, eyes glowing green as her body is surrounded in neon green embers, revealing her true form. Chrysalis, queen of the changelings. Celestia is now awake and alert due to the fear and adrenaline, trying to fight Chrysalis off, but her energy was still drained. The queen was easily able to overpower her. "Help! Luna!"
"Don't bother. If my drones had done their job, your precious guards and sister are already captured," she chuckled. "You're all mine."
Celestia's horn glowed, trying to blast her attacker with a forceful beam of energy, but Chrysalis locks her crooked horn with hers, her own horn glowing green.
We wouldn't want that, would we?
Chrysalis's horn stopped glowing as she moves away. Shortly after, a dark green vine wraps around Celestia's horn. The princess tries to cast a spell, but her magic is cut off by the vine despite her efforts. With Celestia physically and magically drained, Chrysalis could now properly get to work. Using a few quick magic spells, she bound Celestia's wrists together, doing the same to her ankles. She paces around the bed, chuckling in delight as her captive princess futilely squirms.
Now, what to do with you? I think I'll start with this right here.
She daintily reaches over, plucking Celestia's crown off of her head. Celestia growled. Unhand me, Chrysalis. You won't get away with this.
Oh, Celestia, you need to lighten up.
She scoffed, sitting down next to Celestia's feet, casually dragging a finger up her big white soles. All the anger on Celestia's face seemed to disappear as she jolts with a grin.
Ooh, is little Celestia ticklish? Kitschy-coo.
Chrysalis teases, poking at her flinching toes. Stop! Please! She begged, trying to stop herself from giggling. The changeling chuckled, squeezing Celestia's sides.
That's just adorable.
No! Stop it! Celestia squealed, trying to sound threatening despite jolting and giggling. Chrysalis chuckles. Such an easy victory, yet satisfying all the same. She eyes Celestia's body, noting the simple yet regal outfit she was ready to fall asleep in. In a red-violet dress, scented with her usual royal regalia, nothing too flashy, but she looked absolutely stunning in it.
What a lovely dress you've chosen to wear, but I think you'll look better on me,
she says, undoing all the buttons one by one. Celestia gasps, struggling as much as she can to try and get her off. Chrysalis manages to get Celestia's dress off, chuckling as she holds it in front of her. She begins to strip off her own dress, removing her ragged, torn-up gown. She took a moment to revel in her nudity, comparing her own breasts to Celestia's.
Yours are a lot bigger. Is that how you attract so many stallions?
She shrugs before finally putting on Celestia's dress, turning around to admire herself.
Ah, much better on me. Now, where were we?
She smirks, now skittering her fingers against Celestia's now exposed breast. No!
Yes.
Chrysalis grins, digging her fingers into Celestia's ribs, using her thumbs to rub against her nipples, eliciting a moan or two among her laughter.
Such a beautiful body. I can see why so many of your subjects love you.
Get off of me!
Aww, but you're so precious.
She smirks, placing her hands on her endowed breasts and squeezing them, much to Celestia's displeasure.
So large, so beautiful. I've never seen a pair of such perfect breasts. And yet...
Celestia grunted, her body helpless to Chrysalis's groping. No amount of thrashing would keep her hands away.
Almost hypnotic. Is this your technique? Using these lovely things to get them wrapped around your fingers?
She says, rubbing her thumb up against her slowly hardening nipples.
Oh, and not to mention your other lovely curves.
She runs her hand down the poor pony princess's rear before giving it a smack. Celestia growled. Keep your hands off of me, you filthy changeling.
Aw, don't be like that. There's still so much more fun to do.
She giggled, skittering her fingers against her breasts. Celestia blushed furiously as her naked body was being groped and explored. Stop, please. Please. To Celestia's surprise, Chrysalis does stop.
Oh, very well. I think it's time you get that sleep you so desperately wanted. We'll have more fun when I get things properly set up.
She sneers, zapping Celestia's face with a spell. Celestia blinked, now finding it harder and harder to stay up. She felt her consciousness slipping out of her grasp. It was a struggle just to keep her eyes half open. "You'll pay for this," she managed to get out before passing out. When Celestia woke up, she was staring at a ceiling. It wasn't her bedroom. It wasn't the throne room. It wasn't even the dungeon. Where was she? Was what happened all a nightmare? Her vision clears up. She sees the sneering visage of Chrysalis staring down at her. Unfortunately, the nightmare was real.
"Ah, I see you're finally up. Now the fun can begin."
She smiles, clapping in smug delight.
"Are you enjoying the view?"
Celestia refused to respond. Just as she suspected, her horn was still trapped by the vine. She glares at Chrysalis before gasping.
"Ah, I see you've noticed. Don't you think I look good in your clothing?"
She smirks, adjusting the crown on her head. Celestia still gives her the silent treatment, using the time to check her surroundings. It seems like they were in front of the castle's many meeting rooms, but more importantly, looking down, she only saw the foot of a throne where her body should be.
"You like? Some magic I discovered that allowed body parts to be separated, like portals. You can still feel anything that happens to a separate part of your body, even if it's a mile away,"
Chrysalis explained.
"I was planning on just keeping your head for a footrest, but I decided to keep something else. Can you guess what it is?"
She taps her fingers at what's supposed to be the arm of the seat, but Celestia feels fingers tapping against her soles. Celestia gasped, trying to curl her toes, but quickly realized that she couldn't. "Not my feet," she muttered.
"Aye, you're a perceptive one. I couldn't help but love how delightfully ticklish these feet are. So I think this is a suitable torture for you. As for the rest of your body, I had some of my other changelings have fun with it nearby."
As if on cue, Celestia felt her sides being squeezed and her breasts being teased with forked tongues, making her squeal and squirm. You won't get away with this," Celestia said, trying to stifle her giggles.
"Oh, but I already have. Your sister and guards are all detained, and with the massive amount of security I've set up, no pony can save you. Get comfortable and accept your fate,"
she taunted, idly dragging her index fingers under her restrained toes. "Never!" she spat out, still defiant. Shaking her head, Chrysalis placed her bare feet next to Celestia's face.
"Such a shame. I was hoping that you would be a bit more obedient. Oh well, I'll have much more fun breaking you then,"
she says, sticking her index fingers between her big toes. Celestia resisted, or at least attempted to, as she continued to stifle her giggling as her toes pressed against their bonds.
"What's wrong? Nothing defiant to say to me?"
the queen taunted, speeding up her tickling.
"Please, let me hear what you think. I'm curious."
Celestia angrily puffs out her cheeks, trying not to laugh as Chrysalis's fingers scratch down her arches. She was simply edging her on. She wasn't going to give her what she wanted so easily. Chuckling, she gave a casual shrug.
"Is that the way you're going to be now? So be it,"
Chrysalis said, scratching at her heels. She leaned her head to the left, staring down at Celestia with a sadistic, curious look. Celestia kept her lips sealed as best she could, head and feet visibly trembling as it took all her concentration to keep her laughter in.
"I must say, you're quite resistant, but this is just your feet. I wonder."
As if on cue, Celestia felt her upper body be assaulted by what felt like an endless swarm of fingers. fingers digging into her armpits, poking her ribs, tracing across her breasts and around her nipples, squeezing her sides, spidering across her belly, and squeezing her thighs. The sudden intensity shift was too much to handle, and Celestia broke out in wild laughter.
That's more like it.
Chrysalis grinned, motioning her head to the left once more, motioning for her changelings to stop. We're already laughing. It would be hard to stop with a constant source of tickling. She kept it light enough to keep her going, using a few fingers to scratch underneath her toes. Stop it! Please! Celestia laughed, cheeks turning red as she laid her head back, big, white soles shaking as much as the bonds allowed them to.
Tell you what, I'll give you a break if you can kiss my toes.
She smirked, dangling her left foot over Celestia's face, big toe right above her lips, her right foot scrunching up her hair between her toes. No, please! The feelings overwhelmed Celestia, slowly cracking at her willpower. She still had no intention of surrendering to Chrysalis, but every moment was ticklish agony as she prayed that Luna, Twilight, anyone would help her out. She blushed furiously, cheeks completely red, as she lost herself in laughter. Chrysalis pursed her lips, satisfied but also confused. She noticed Celestia's blushing. She also felt something off. Was it love? Chrysalis stopped, dumbstruck.
What's this? Are you actually enjoying the tickling?
She widened her eyes, grinning evilly. Celestia only blushed harder, trying to look away. Chrysalis let out a wild cackle.
Oh, this is just too perfect. I've been trying to torture you, but it was just turning you on all this time.
She clapped her hands together in glee.
Well, why deny you what you want,
I want you to let me go and leave Equestria. Celestia mutters, still not admitting anything. Chrysalis pressed her soul against Celestia's cheek.
That's what you like, not what you want.
Celestia's lips sealed up once more, looking to the side in defiance. Oh, come on, princess. You can tell me. It's all right. Or should I tickle the truth out of you?
But you'd like that, wouldn't you? You would absolutely love for me to keep raking my claw down your helpless white soles.
She grinned, dramatically raising her arms, ready to strike at her feet once more. Celestia winces, shutting her eyes tight as she prepares for the inevitable, laying her head to the side. Chrysalis notices this and deliberately waits. She curls her foot, playing with Celestia's hair between her toes, wiggling her fingers for the special moment. It took a good minute, which to Celestia felt like an hour, but Celestia dropped her guard and opened her eyes out of foolish curiosity. And that was the moment. Like a ferocious feline pouncing on its prey, Chrysalis's fingers pounced on Celestia's hapless and helpless soles. Her devious fingers clawed into her arches, smiling as she noticed her feet were more pink than white. It sure didn't stop her from stroking her fingers down them, watching in delight as she tried to curl up. Celestia burst out into wild laughter, shaking her head back and forth, her mane tickling between Chrysalis's toes. No, stop it!
Well, either you admit you love this, or kiss my toes. That's your choice. Or you can just let me keep going. Either choice works out well for me, she said, dancing her nails against the stems of her toes for a moment before stopping, waiting for a response.
I'll give you 5 seconds.
If not, well, let's see. 5.
Celestia huffed, glaring at Chrysalis.
4.
She gritted her teeth, given a sadistic choice that had no real positive outcome.
3.
She eyes Chrysalis's toes dangling in front of her face.
2.
She tries to curl her toes, still restrained, still helpless.
1.
She swallowed her pride. I love being tickled, she muttered under her breath.
What was that? I couldn't quite hear you. You'll have to speak up.
I love being tickled, Celestia said reluctantly, nostrils flaring as she blushed.
Well now, was that so hard?
She chuckled, slightly tracing her index fingers down her soles one more time.
I admire your honesty. You get a small break before I give you what your heart desires.
Celestia laid her head back, relieved to get some time to breathe, but ashamed of what she did to get it. It wasn't a lie. She did enjoy being tickled. To an extent. It was a great way to pass the time or have fun with the ones she cared about. Getting in tickle fights with her sister over trivial matters, or allowing herself to not be the regal royalty that others saw her. She did find that arousing, playfully tickling and being tickled by a now ex-lover, but being overpowered, groped, and captured didn't exactly put her in the mood to be tickled. She wanted to struggle, break free and retake her crown, her kingdom, her throne, and yet she could still find a positive side to her current situation. All responsibility had been shifted off of her. She could just simply lay there, being tickled to her heart's content. If it wasn't a sadistic changeling queen, this might be more enjoyable. Maybe it was the fact that she was seemingly stuck there forever, that she was grasping at straws trying to find some sort of positive spin on the situation that led her to draw that conclusion. It was quite a curious feeling not being completely attached together. She didn't feel out of breath at all. The break was more of a mental resting point. It felt like she had a surprising amount of physical energy. If only she wasn't bound to a chair with the rest of her body put somewhere else. The rest of her body seemed surprisingly unrestrained compared to her head and feet. She could move around pretty well. It seemed her wrists and ankles were stretched out to put her in the X position, but aside from that, there seemed to be a surprising amount of wiggle room. It did make her feel self-conscious, wriggling her naked body around for an unseen audience. But the changeling queen using her face as a personal footrest was probably more embarrassing. Chrysalis lowered her feet, squishing her cheeks together between her black soles. It was definitely more embarrassing.
Well, it's been 5 minutes. Break time's over. But don't worry, I'll give you another one when I feel like it,
Chrysalis said, wasting no time as she picked up right where she left off, scratching her fingernails against the stems of her toes.
No, please. Celestia laughed, almost sounding like a whine. There's no way that was 5 minutes. It barely felt like 5 seconds. Chrysalis couldn't keep her own evil giggles in. Of course, she didn't give her the luxury of a 5 minutes rest. It had been only 2 minutes at most, but Celestia wasn't in any sort of position to debate.
There now. Isn't this so much better? Both of us gain what we want.
She grinned, leaning to the right, using both of her hands to scribble her fingers up and down the pink sole.
Kitchy kitchy coo.
Celestia felt more of her willpower drain as soon as she heard the verbal teasing. It was so devious. A few simple childish words were enough to make even some of the toughest ticklees break out into laughter. Even though it wasn't that difficult to get her to laugh at this point, especially since she was forced to admit her secret liking to it, verbal teasing always seemed to amplify the sensations. Chrysalis continued her method of attack, 2 hands on 1 foot. One hand's fingers would wiggle their way between her toes, while the other would dance down her arch. One hand would walk up her sole while the other would play with her big toe. Both hands would start at the heel and work their way up to her toes. There were so many ways she could toy with her, and she would switch feet just to keep Celestia in hysterics. The torture seemed to continue for what seemed like hours for Celestia, until Chrysalis suddenly stopped.
Well, I've given you your break. Now it's my turn,
Chrysalis says, leaning back in her throne, squishing her foot against Celestia's cheek. Celestia blinked. What are you talking about?
Oh yes, as the new ruler, I deserve a few breaks myself. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to rest. I'm simply exhausted from all the work I've had to do. My minions will attend to you, so you aren't too bored,
she said, faking a yawn as she smirks, using magic to plug her ears with cotton. What? Celestia shouted, trying to get her attention. What do you mean, attend to me? What are they going to do? She suddenly squeals, as she feels as if fingers dig into her sides. Chrysalis didn't answer, closing her eyes with a smile on her face, resting her head on her hand.
Sorry, can't hear you. Taking a nap,
she lied, giving a brief shrug, keeping her foot firmly planted on Celestia's cheek. The unseen fingers continued to poke and prod at her sides, giving her thighs a quick squeeze after every 4 or 5 pokes. As Celestia helplessly squirmed, she saw 2 changelings approach the throne, leaning against the arm of the seat, grazing greedily at her soles. Wait, please, no. She tried to plead before the changelings began scribbling their fingers on her taut soles, not unlike the method Chrysalis employed on her previously. But with 2 changelings, that meant double the fingers, double the tickling, making Celestia naturally double over in laughter. Of course, her feet were just one ticklish part of her body. Though hidden from her view, more devious hands began to explore her upper body. The unknown amount of changelings were giving the princess a variety of sensations. Fingers digging into the hollows of her armpits, their fingers and thumb closed together and vibrating against the sensitive skin. A single fingertip tracing and teasing around one nipple, while a hand squeezes the other breast. Hands playing with her ribs like piano keys, finding the spaces in the ribcage to push their fingers slightly further in. Fingers on her belly that got dangerously close to her navel, teasing her with the idea that eventually one of them would slip in. Even tickle spots often untouched were given attention. Celestia could feel fingers dancing in the areas right behind her knees. A more devious changeling was squeezing her in her thighs. Celestia's reaction was explosive without the need to stop and breathe. Her laughter would not only reach an all-time high, but it stayed there. The changelings torturing her body saw the royal figure violently thrash about as much as it could, but the ones at the throne could only see Celestia's head lean back as she screamed. As her minions continued to torture her new plaything, Chrysalis continued to grin sadistically, plucking the cotton out of her ears when Celestia was too busy laughing to be looking. The laughter caused by multiple ticklers was so much more pleasant than her doing it alone. The downside being that she couldn't get this type of intense reaction on her own. Well, not without the use of magic or tools. She did love giving her punishment a very personal touch. While the throne did implement the use of magic for body separation, it made up for it by giving her creative ways to torture Celestia. It allowed easy access to the former princess's torture from the comfort of her new chair. The love that was coming from Celestia was delicious. Alicorn love had an alluring flair, the high-class dessert that you got to eat at a wedding. It was certainly a treat for her changeling children, but to Chrysalis, it was especially delicious knowing that this love was coming from torture. Even if it was against her will, there was still a part of Celestia that couldn't get enough of this, and that knowledge made everything about this situation all the more satisfying. Chrysalis was itching to explore the rest of her body in full, but it would probably take some time. First, she had to drain her willpower, and being part of the throne room furniture is a good start for demoralizing. Days turned into weeks. Chrysalis would return to her throne and continue her tickling. Sometimes it would be hours of her idly scratching and scribbling at her soles. Other times she would just focus on tickling one spot on her feet. Other times she would invite other changelings to go all out on her feet and body. The very few times Celestia got a mental break, Chrysalis would lower her black soles above Celestia's face, prompting her to worship them, which she still stubbornly refused. But a quick scribbling against her soles would have her open mouth long enough for her to stick her toes in. Every night, Chrysalis would go to sleep and enlist 1 or 2 or 10 of the changeling guards to entertain Celestia. While not intense tickle torture, the light teasing of fingers across her soles or belly ensured that she would be up all night. Eventually, Chrysalis allowed 1 continuous hour of break for Celestia, in exchange for an extensive foot worshipping afterwards, which Celestia was begrudgingly grateful for. Celestia's willpower slowly but surely started to deteriorate, her hope of escape wearing thinner by the hour. What couldn't be done to her physically started to toll on her mentally. In the midst of one of her breaks, she began to resign to her fate, even enjoy parts of it. The thoughts occurred to her that maybe this wasn't so bad after all. Or maybe that was having Stockholm Syndrome as a method of coping. It was getting hard to tell at this point. One day before Chrysalis started her daily session, she hesitated, adjusting the crown Celestia once wore on her head.
Well, Celestia, I have a proposition to make. I'm willing to promote you from throne to personal pet. No longer would you be stuck staring at the ceiling for the rest of your life. You'll be able to get your body back and will receive much more rewarding treatment if you fully submit to your queen. What do you say?
Celestia wearily blinked, honestly considering taking the offer up. On the one hand, agreeing would strip her of her remaining pride and freedom. On the other hand, it's not like she could get lower at this point. Well, she could. She just didn't want to go any lower. I submit. You are my queen. Chrysalis grinned ear to ear.
Excellent. We'll be starting right away.
Her horn began to glow before hitting Celestia with the same spell that knocked her out before. Celestia was so mentally drained that she fell asleep right away. When Celestia awoke, she was back in her bedroom. At first, she felt a sense of relief that maybe the previous weeks of ticklish hell were all just a dream, until she saw the smirking Chrysalis to her right, and cruel reality set back in.
Good morning, pet.
Celestia yawned, trying to stretch. Her arms were tied to the corners of her bed above her head, and her magic was still blocked. It was hard to tell whether or not that was an improvement from her previous predicament.
I have to admit, when you were part of my throne, I missed having these curves to myself.
She smirked while giving her bare breasts a squeeze, rubbing her thumb on her nipples, much to Celestia's discomfort.
Don't worry, I won't keep you here for long. I just want to make sure you're comfortable while I play.
Chrysalis moved her hands down her body, squeezing her breasts, tracing her fingers down her side, giving her ass a light smack, then running her hands down her legs to her feet.
There we go,
she cooed, lifting up Celestia's right ankle, giving her big toe a kiss. Celestia tensed up, her toes flinching at the touch of her lips. She tried to pull her foot back, apprehensive about what she was planning.
Relax, pet. I won't be getting into tickling. Yet,
she said, before delivering kisses to the rest of her toes. Celestia let out a small grumble. It was still demeaning to be called someone's pet, but she had to admit that having her feet kissed instead of tickled was actually relaxing.
I figure I should reward you for your obedience in keeping me so entertained. Think of this as an incentive for future good behavior,
Chrysalis said as she pressed her thumb against her pinkish feet, starting at her heels. She began rubbing in small circles, working her way up the smooth surface. Celestia let out a shiver, instinctively jolting at the touch. Due to the past weeks of torment, nearly any sensation on her feet automatically registered as ticklish, but slowly the feeling became more relaxing as her feet became accustomed to the massage. As Chrysalis rubbed her feet, Celestia realized that her legs weren't bound at all. She had the perfect opportunity to kick her in the jaw and find a way to escape. And yet, despite the opportunity presented to her, she found herself unwilling to assault her. Chrysalis used her free hand to make a fist, placing it right on her arch, rolling it across her arch, her knuckles applying just a small amount of pressure.
Doesn't this feel good, pet?
Celestia nodded. Yes, my queen, she said in an almost trance-like state, shivering as Chrysalis's finger made her tension and stress melt away. A soft moan escapes her lips. Then another, until Celestia was a blushing, murmuring mess.
And this is just a taste of what's to come.
Chrysalis chuckles, emphasizing her point by dragging her tongue up one of her soles, flicking against her toes when it reaches the top.
Of course, don't think I'm done tickling you. That laugh of yours is just too precious for me not to hear.
She chuckled, sliding a finger down her sole, just to watch her jolt, before sticking her big toe in her mouth, alternating between sucking on it, nibbling on it, and flicking her tongue against it. Despite the teasing, Celestia found herself feeling more relaxed, and she wasn't sure why. It seemed like the precious moments of Chrysalis's kissing and rubbing her feet started to make up for weeks of her endless torment. After a few minutes of worship, Chrysalis took Celestia's toe out of her mouth, giving her toes another set of kisses before she set them down and adjusted her position on the bed, sitting on Celestia's belly.
Now it's my turn.
She grinned, placing her foot into Celestia's face like she had done so many times before. Celestia blinked, giving a kiss to the toe ring before giving another kiss to the toe itself. She leaned forward as much as she can, sticking out her tongue as she dragged it up and down her foot, starting at the heel and moving it up to the ball of the foot before moving back down in slow licks. Chrysalis spread out her toes, smirking at Celestia without additional prompting, obediently stuck her tongue between the spaces. She had turned the wise rule of Equestria into one so subservient, and all it took was an exploitation of one of her tickling kink over several weeks. Now that she had broken Celestia, she would set her sights on her sister. It would be absolutely delightful to see Princess Luna bow down to her due to torture delivered by her sister. That was for the future. For now, she would reward Celestia for her obedience, giving her loving massages and pampering her beautiful white feet, but still providing her with tickles that she absolutely loves, and making her beg for more. She was now her toy to play with, however she saw fit.
Isn't this the life, Celestia?
Chrysalis laughed, now pressing both her feet into Celestia's face. Celestia slowly nodded, her face smothered by her new queen's soles. She stopped struggling altogether, accepting her place. The strong, defiant prisoner was gone, and replacing it was an obedient servant to a queen who would provide her with what she loved. Deep in her mind, there was still hope that she could be saved, but for the moment, she was oddly satisfied being the personal pet of the new Queen of Equestria.